welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something that, well, it touches the lives of so many people. Insulin resistance, prediabetes, and type 2 diabetes. The numbers are, frankly, staggering. Globally, we're looking at 537 million adults with type 2 diabetes.
Wow.
And an even larger group, 541 million, with prediabetes. That's data from the International Diabetes Federation.
It really is a massive global health challenge. I mean, we're talking well over 1 billion people affected.
Yeah, exactly. And, chances are, listening to this, you might have a personal connection or know someone close who does. These numbers, they're just climbing.
That scale just underscores how crucial it is to, really get what's going on and maybe more importantly, what we can actually do about it.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to get right to the heart of these conditions. We want to clear away some of the myths out there, the confusion, and really lay out some clear, actionable steps, things you can actually take towards reversing them without feeling like you need to, completely overhaul your life overnight.
Right. Sustainable changes.
It's all about understanding practical solutions, things that actually work.
And, maybe one of the biggest hurdles to taking effective action is some of the ingrained beliefs people have about these conditions.
Oh, for sure.
What would you say is one of the most pervasive, maybe limiting ideas out there?
For me, it's definitely the idea that type 2 diabetes is primarily genetic.
Yes, it's in my genes argument.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That it's largely predetermined, not much you can do. But the evidence we've looked at, it really pushes back hard against that.
It really does. Let's dig into that genetic piece a bit. It's a super common assumption, but when you actually look at the data, it's a much more dynamic picture.
Yeah, think about the old name it had, adult onset diabetes.
Right.
Because it was almost exclusively seen in adults.
Right.
But now, incredibly, we're seeing diagnoses in kids, like 5 years old.
It's shocking.
Our fundamental genetics haven't shifted that dramatically in just a few decades. But our food environment,
totally different story.
Completely different. That massive shift in who's getting it really points away from genetics being the main driver.
It's a really compelling point. And if you connect that to the bigger trend, this surge across all age groups, it strongly suggests environmental factors are playing a much bigger role.
A dominant role, yeah.
Yeah.
And diet is obviously a huge part of that environment.
Leading contender for sure.
And the evidence gets even more interesting, I think, when you look at studies on identical twins.
Oh yeah, the twin studies are fascinating.
People who share 100% of the same DNA. Now, if type 2 diabetes were purely genetic, you'd expect both twins to either get it or not get it, right?
Logically, yes. Same genes, same outcome.
But that's not consistently what happens. You actually see cases where one twin develops the condition and the other doesn't, even with identical DNA. That stark difference really suggests other factors are involved, tipping the scales.
It really underscores that while genetics might influence your susceptibility, maybe give you a predisposition.
Sure, predisposition's fair.
That doesn't necessarily seal your fate. It highlights the power of, how we live, the environment we're in, lifestyle factors.
But I think the absolute most powerful evidence, the real game changer in this genetics discussion, it's the sheer number of studies. We're talking hundreds. Hundreds of studies showing that type 2 diabetes can actually be put into remission.
Yes, remission, not just managed.
Exactly. Through dietary changes. This isn't just about managing symptoms with pills. It's about fundamentally altering the condition itself.
Which raises a really important question for a lot of people, I think. If it's so clear that diet can lead to remission, why isn't this approach more front and center?
That's a fantastic question. Honestly, probably worth its own deep dive sometime.
Probably, yeah.
But for today, the key takeaway is this. Your genes don't get the final say. And medication isn't the only path forward for type 2 diabetes.
Crucial message.
So with that really important myth hopefully clarified, let's dive into a bit of Biology 101. Let's understand what's actually happening in the body. Let's talk insulin resistance.
Exactly. And it's vital to understand insulin resistance isn't like flipping a switch, on or off.
Right, not binary.
It exists on a spectrum. You can be perfectly healthy, great insulin sensitivity, then gradually move along that spectrum into prediabetes, and eventually, potentially, into type 2 diabetes.
Like a dimmer switch, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And the encouraging thing is, where you are on the spectrum isn't fixed. It can definitely shift. You can move back towards healthy.
Okay, that's good to know. So, at the heart of all this is glucose.
Blood sugar.
which, as we know, is our body's main fuel source. We primarily get it when our bodies break down two main types of food: starches
Your breads, pastas, rice, potatoes, oats, that kind of thing. Yep.
and sugar. So basically anything sweet tasting, from fruit and juice to desserts and candy.
And when we eat those foods, especially refined ones, our digestive system breaks them down pretty quickly into glucose. That glucose then enters our bloodstream.
Leading to a rise in our blood glucose levels.
Right.
Particularly after a meal high in those carbs, you get what's called a glucose spike, a pretty rapid increase.
And our bodies, well, they're designed to keep things stable. They don't like those big rapid swings in blood sugar.
So what happens? The body has a response, right?
It does, a very elegant one, actually. The pancreas, this important little organ, it jumps into action. It releases a hormone called insulin.
Okay, insulin, we hear that word a lot.
Insulin acts like a messenger, or maybe a key. Its job is to lower that blood glucose. It tells your cells, mainly in the liver, muscles, and fat tissue, to take the glucose out of the bloodstream and store it for later use.
So insulin unlocks the doors to these storage depots, letting the glucose move out of the blood.
Precisely. In a healthy system, this works smoothly. Glucose goes up after eating, insulin comes out, glucose goes down into the cells, levels return to normal. Simple.
But here's where things can start to go wrong. You use the dimmer switch analogy. How does that fit in?
Well, think about something like coffee. Remember when that first cup in the morning gave you a real buzz?
Oh yeah, long time ago.
Huh. Right. But then, over time, maybe you found you needed more coffee. Maybe 2 cups or stronger coffee, just to get the same effect.
Definitely. Built up a tolerance.
Exactly. Your body became less responsive to the caffeine. A similar thing can happen with insulin. If there's a constantly high demand for insulin, often because we're eating lots of high-carb foods causing frequent, large glucose spikes.
Like hitting that insulin button over and over and over.
Your body's cells can start to become less responsive to its signals. They start to resist the insulin.
Ah, okay, so that's insulin resistance. The cells are ignoring the insulin's message.
Pretty much. The body is still making insulin, sometimes even more insulin trying to compensate.
Working overtime.
But the cells just aren't listening as well. They're not taking up the glucose efficiently, so the insulin becomes less effective at clearing glucose from the blood.
And the obvious consequence of that, reduced effectiveness.
Which is elevated blood glucose levels. Simple as that. Because the insulin isn't doing its job properly, glucose hangs around in the blood for longer and at higher levels than it should.
Okay, and that's what doctors measure, right?
Right.
Like with a fasting glucose test.
Exactly, that's a common one. You fast overnight, they check your blood glucose level first thing in the morning.
And there are ranges for that.
Yep. Based on those fasting levels, healthcare pros have set diagnostic ranges. Generally under 100 milligrams per deciliter, or under 5.5 millimoles per liter, depending on where you are, that's considered healthy.
Okay.
Between 100 and 126 milli-GDL. That's typically the pre-diabetic range. It's a warning sign that insulin resistance is likely developing.
A yellow light.
Kind of, yeah. And if your fasting glucose is consistently above 126 milli-GL, that usually leads to a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes.
Now here's something that really struck me. When you talk about the difference in the amount of sugar in the blood between someone healthy and someone with type 2 diabetes, it sounds surprisingly small.
It does, doesn't it?
Like I heard it compared to maybe 1 small sugar cube's worth of glucose circulating in a healthy person's blood at any given time.
Yeah, roughly that amount in the entire bloodstream.
And someone with type 2 diabetes might only have, say, 1.5 sugar cubes worth, just that tiny bit extra.
And this is the crucial part. That seemingly tiny extra amount circulating constantly day after day.
It adds up.
It adds up to significant and widespread damage over time. That slightly elevated glucose level acts almost like sandpaper on the inside of your blood vessels.
Oof, not a good image.
It can damage cells directly. It triggers chronic, low-grade inflammation throughout the body. It can negatively impact brain function, and it contributes to something called glycation.
Glycation, what's that?
Think of it like sugar sticking to proteins in your body, making them stiff and less functional, like how sugar caramelizes and gets hard and brittle when you heat it.
Ah, okay, so it damages proteins.
Exactly, making tissues less flexible, less efficient. And over the long haul, this constant state of slightly elevated blood sugar contributes to really serious complications. Nerve damage, kidney problems, vision loss, increased risk of heart attack and stroke.
And even in severe unmanaged cases, things like amputations.
Sadly, yes. So while the immediate difference, that extra half sugar cube, seems minor, its cumulative impact is absolutely massive.
Wow, okay. So if we circle back, the root issue driving prediabetes and type 2 diabetes is often too much insulin.
Which is driven by too much glucose, usually from our diet.
Right. So the logical next step seems to be figure out how to lower those insulin levels naturally.
Precisely. Give the body less glucose to deal with so it doesn't need to pump out so much insulin, and the cells can hopefully regain sensitivity over time.
Okay, let's unpack that. Lowering insulin by managing glucose intake. As we said, the biggest source of those rapid glucose spikes comes from carbohydrates, the starches and sugars. So maybe this is a good moment for everyone listening to just take a second. Think honestly about your regular diet.
Yeah, do a quick mental inventory.
How much bread, pasta, rice, pizza? What about sodas, granola bars, fruit juices, candy, desserts? Where do those fit in your typical day or week?
That moment of honest self-assessment, it's really step one. You have to know where the glucose is coming from before you can make changes.
And to help people get started with those changes, there's actually a really helpful resource we should mention, a free 7-day Diabetic Meal Plan PDF. It's linked in the description.
Oh, nice. That sounds practical.
Yeah, it gives a framework for eating in a way that helps keep glucose levels more stable. And it really emphasizes that proteins, healthy fats, and fiber, they don't spike your glucose significantly.
Oh, right. Those should be the foundation.
They should be the focus of your meals, yeah.
What's interesting about that approach is it shifts the focus from just cutting calories overall.
Right, not just calorie counting.
To focusing on the type of food and its direct impact on your blood glucose and insulin response. Quality over just quantity.
Totally. The resource even gives a clear example. Like instead of a super common but really high carb breakfast, say, white toast with jam and a glass of orange juice.
Sugar on sugar on sugar, basically.
Pretty much all fast-acting carbs.
Yeah.
A much better alternative. Maybe a cup of tea with some soft-boiled eggs, or even like a simple ham sandwich, maybe on whole grain, which has protein and fat to slow things down.
Yeah, much more balanced, less likely to cause that huge spike and crash.
And for folks who want to go even deeper, there's also a Diabetes Survival Kit PDF linked down there too. More comprehensive guidance on managing diabetes, living healthier.
So resources are available. People aren't alone in figuring this out.
Absolutely not. And the really empowering message here, I think, is that managing insulin resistance, even reversing type 2 diabetes, it's genuinely within reach for many people just by making these informed dietary shifts.
It's not necessarily this life sentence of just more meds and worsening health that some people fear.
No. And the science really backs this up strongly now. There was a big review article in 2021.
I know the one you mean.
It clearly showed that one of the most effective ways to reverse type 2 diabetes is actively working to flatten those glucose curves. Avoid the big spikes.
Yeah, manage the post-meal glucose response.
This review, it was called. Let me get the title right. Efficacy and safety of low and very low carbohydrate diets for type 2 diabetes remission, systematic review, and meta-analysis. Quite a mouthful.
Academic titles, yeah.
But the key finding was incredible. Over 57% of participants in the studies they looked at actually achieved diabetes remission in just 6 months.
57%, that's huge. Just by changing their diet to lower carb approaches.
It's a powerful statistic.
Yeah.
It shows what's possible.
And what's also really noteworthy is that even major organizations like the American Diabetes Association, who historically maybe had more, let's say, conservative dietary recommendations, they're now acknowledging and even endorsing diets that minimize those post-meal glucose spikes.
Oh, interesting. So the mainstream is catching up.
They're recognizing it as a valid strategy for achieving remission. The evidence is just getting too strong to ignore.
So, okay, this isn't some fringe idea anymore. It's becoming more accepted. Now, for people listening who might feel a bit overwhelmed, like, okay, I need to change my whole diet.
Yeah, it can sound daunting.
Are there simpler things, like easy hacks people can start with?
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be all or nothing right away. There are some surprisingly simple, really effective things you can add in. Strategic habits.
Okay, like what?
Well, often it's the small, sustainable changes that actually lead to the biggest long-term results.
Makes sense. Easier to stick with.
So, one really easy one. Just add a veggie starter to one meal a day. Lunch or dinner.
Just some non-starchy vegetables beforehand, like a small salad or some celery sticks.
Exactly. The fiber in those veggies helps slow down the absorption of glucose from whatever you eat next. Simple, but effective.
Okay, I like that. What else?
Another super accessible one. Take a short, brisk 10-minute walk after one meal per day.
Just 10 minutes.
Just 10 minutes. Even that small amount of activity significantly improves how your body uses glucose right after you've eaten, helps shuttle it into the muscles.
Wow. Okay, those sound genuinely doable. Not like, training for a marathon or eating only kale.
Exactly. They're practical, not super restrictive. Most people can fit those into their day without feeling totally overwhelmed.
No intense calorie counting, no extreme diets needed to just get started.
Right. And as we mentioned, those free PDFs in the description, they've got more details, recipes, tips to help people implement these kinds of things.
Great. And I think maybe the most important message, the one we really want to drive home today, is that these conditions, they are not solely determined by your genes. You do have significant control. You have agency.
That sense of empowerment is it's crucial. Believing you can actually influence your health rather than just being a victim of fate or genetics.
It changes everything. Knowing you can make choices each day that positively impact things.
It really does. It fuels motivation. It fuels success.
We get that making changes can feel daunting. We really do. So we genuinely encourage you. Just try one. Try the veggie starter. Or try the 10-minute walk. Pick one. You might be really surprised by the positive impact, even from something small. And remember, there are probably more resources too, maybe videos with recipes, exercise ideas, managing complications. Check the creator's channel or website.
And just to reiterate, the goal isn't necessarily like 0 carbs forever. That's often not sustainable or even desirable for everyone.
Right. It's not about complete elimination.
It's about learning to make informed choices about the types of carbs you eat, and really importantly, how you eat them to minimize those big harmful glucose spikes.
Becoming a smarter eater, basically. Understanding cause and effect in your own body.
Exactly. Now, zooming out just a little bit, it's also really important to acknowledge that this huge rise in insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, it isn't happening in a vacuum.
No, there's a bigger context.
Our current food environment plays a massive role. Think about it. Cheap, convenient, ultra-processed foods loaded with refined carbs and sugar are everywhere.
Or unavoidable sometimes. And heavily marketed.
So heavily marketed, especially the highly palatable, sometimes genuinely addictive stuff. That makes individual choices much harder.
Yeah, it's not just about individual willpower when the whole environment pushes you in one direction.
Exactly. So this broader societal context, the systemic factors in the food industry and our culture, they have to be part of the conversation too.
It needs a dual approach then.
I think so. We need to empower individuals with knowledge and tools, absolutely, like we're trying to do today. But we also need to advocate for bigger systemic changes. Things like better food labeling, maybe regulations on marketing unhealthy foods, especially to kids.
Making the healthy choice the easier choice, ideally.
That would be the goal. Creating an environment that actually supports health rather than undermining it.
Okay, so to kind of wrap up our deep dive for today,
Yeah.
what's a core message we want people to leave with?
I think the main takeaway is managing insulin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes.
Right.
It is absolutely possible.
It's not hopeless.
Not at all. It starts with understanding those glucose spikes, what causes them, how they affect your body, and then making informed, sustainable choices, especially dietary ones, to minimize them.
And to really help kickstart that journey, we definitely encourage everyone, check out those free resources, the 7-Day Meal Plan, the Diabetes Survival Kit. They're linked right there in the description.
Yeah, download them. They're packed with practical, easy to understand info. They could genuinely be a game changer for someone.
We really believe that with the right knowledge, the right tools, people can take significant control back. Control over their health, their well-being.
Absolutely.
This is a topic I feel really strongly about, and I truly hope this discussion has helped you understand your body a bit better, feel a bit more empowered. So please do explore those free resources. I'm genuinely optimistic you'll find inspiration, motivation, something to help you take that next step. Remember, you're absolutely not alone in this. Making a real difference is achievable.
Definitely. And of course, we need to include the important disclaimer.
Yes. The necessary bit.
The information we've discussed today, it's purely for educational purposes. It is absolutely not a substitute for personalized medical advice from your own healthcare provider.
Crucial point.
Always consult with your doctor or maybe your registered dietitian before making any significant changes to your diet, your lifestyle, your medication, anything, especially if you have existing health conditions.
Couldn't agree more. Your health team knows your specific situation.
Exactly.
And hey, if you found this deep dive helpful, if you want to keep exploring important health topics like this with us,
Yeah.
please make sure you subscribe to the show. That way you won't miss out on any of our future conversations.